I think I showed a small segment on this once before where I rerouted the end of this to make this neck joint match up with the body better on the fretting.
3:28 a.m.
Got the 12-string neck in my holding device here. I wanted to point out, you've seen this in a video or two before. This is one of two neck holding devices I've made. This one actually, I use this to hold the guitar too. Depending on how you put this in the vise, you can turn the guitar 360 degrees. You can do all kinds of things with this little device. It's really a handy little outfit. So I thought I'd show you here now how I'm going to actually use it to hold the dovetail here. I'm going to work on this dovetail a little bit more with a router. I've decided I want to cut it about an 1/8 inch, I guess you'd call the dovetail taller. So in other words, I want to remove about an 1/8 inch of wood off of the heel of this neck. That will work better with my fretboard alignment on the 14th fret of the body, etc. So that's why I'm doing it. I could solve the problem a different way, but this is the way I've chosen to solve it. Hope I don't regret it because you can really screw up with a router really easy. I don't have templates or anything. I just do it by eye, so that's the way I'm going to do this. Got to be brave, But anyway, I thought I'd show you this gadget that I made here a little closer. I think I've showed this before, but I'll tell you what, this thing is worth its weight in gold. It really is. I can see StuMac coming out with this deal. I hope they give me a royalty if they do. Okay, so basically it's just a little piece of square tubing that tightened into the vise right here. And on that square tubing, all I really have is a very simple piece of pipe welded to it. So it's welded at an L, or an angle. Then I have another piece of pipe that fits directly over that piece of pipe. To that, I welded another piece of square tubing and just kind of a channel here, just something that I could put some padding in. So this little U-shaped channel right here, welded to the top of that little square tube, and then I've got leather glued in there. So there's leather glued in there, and I can put this in there. I have a C-clamp cut off and welded there, as you can see. A very simple design, really. There's not much to it. And in this case, I'm putting a piece of leather there on the heel, and I can tighten this down, and then I can swing this to whatever angle I want here and tighten it down with the little screw. I have a threaded screw on this side right here, so I can tighten it down in any position. And like I said, you can put this in the vise any direction, so you could have this up vertical, and then the whole body of the guitar could be in there, and you can swing it. It really is a handy little device. It's handy for a lot of purposes. I'm finding that I use it all the time. So I just thought I'd show this to you. It's easy to make if you've got welders and steel fabrication equipment, of course. It's easy to make. I should probably go into cahoots with StuMac and have these mass produced, because seriously, this thing is handy. I've already got the router set to the proper depth. And here's where you'll see a grown man cry if it doesn't go right.
Every time it rains, Lord, I run to my window. All I do is just wring my hands and moan. Listen to that.
Well, no crying, but I'd be lying to you if I told you it went perfect. There's a little bit of a divot right there, but not enough to hurt anything. I'm not worried about it. But that did it, and that knocked off the 1/8 of an inch off that heel that I needed to knock off. Now, I've left this a little heavy anyway, so I can clean it all up with chisels and stuff. I might need to take a little bit off of the top of this, but if I do need to do that, I'll probably just do that with a bandsaw or something like that. Otherwise, we're in pretty good shape. In other words, when you put this on here and you allow for your nut, I'm just approximating the allowance there. And when you line up down here, then this fret should line up exactly with that joint. Now it does. So I'm real happy with that now. So basically I more or less lengthen the dovetail. I may have to cut a little off of here yet. I'm not sure, off the end of here. But I'm not worried about that right now. I'm just cleaning up the dovetail. I actually cut it a second time off camera because I didn't feel I went deep enough the first time. And then I didn't try to be a hero and cut it right up to the original one. So I just decided to leave a little bit, and I can come back in and chisel that out very easily with a chisel. It's just easier to do it that way, and you don't have to worry about making a mistake and all that. I just score it along here with a chisel first, and then I can go through this direction and hopefully cut it right off. It seems to be working pretty well. It only takes a couple seconds. You know, it's a little bit of extra work, but it's only a little bit of work compared to how much work it would be if you screwed up. So this way you can kind of guarantee you're not going to screw it up. This side here I left a little bit more, so it might take a little bit more work on this side, but that's all right. That's pretty clean. If you come at it from different directions, you can really get it very nice. A little bit down here on the end now to clean up, and then we've got it. I think that looks just fine. More than likely we'll do a little more tweaking to it as we fit it up to the body. I'm going to measure the length of this now and measure the thickness of the block in the guitar and make sure this isn't going to go too far through the block. I don't think it will, but I just want to double check it. Well, there's what she looks like with the neck in her. It goes in, about a 1/4 inch to go roughly. And matter of fact, that's what I'm getting ready to measure, is how far do I need to go yet. So let's do that. And 273 thousandths, so it's a little over 1/4. And 256 on that side, so it's a little crooked maybe or something. Let me just measure that again. 257 is what I'm getting there now, so that is about right at 1/4. And anyway, my idea is that I want it to be about, I don't know, 60 thousandths or more higher than that back here at about where the saddle will be. Might be a little tricky trying to measure that exactly. Not exactly sure how I'm going to measure that. Got a scale here. I can measure it with that for sure, but so we're at about 30 seconds on that side. About 1930 seconds, which I'm not exactly sure what that equates to. 19 divided by 32 equals, that's 593 thousandths approximately. It seems kind of high. I didn't think it'd be that high. So I'm angling pretty good right now. That's what it sounds like. Let me look at it. Yeah, it's angling pretty good. So, but this is a little loose. That's probably where my problem is. I need to figure out where I'm tight and all that and start working this in, and I'm going to keep a real close eye on this across here. I want this to be about a 1/16 of an inch higher right here is what I think I'm shooting for. Somewhere between a 1/16 and an 1/8. I definitely don't want to be an 1/8. So anyway, we'll see. I'm going to get some carbon paper put in here and see where I'm rubbing at. You can probably see the dark marks in there from the carbon paper on both sides. And anyway, those are the things that I've got to cut out. Obviously, it's rubbing in those spaces. So I will cut those out, and we'll keep fitting it and just working it in there till it fits like a glove. I got the neck fitting up pretty darn good. It's fitting tight, and it's straight, and it's level, and the angle seems to be pretty good. It's late on Friday afternoon, and I think I'm just going to quit on it. Maybe either look at it tomorrow or Monday. Just call that good for now, because it's getting there, and I don't want to, rush through it and mess this part up. This is the most important part, really, of the whole build, if you ask me. I have my fretboard marked off for the width of the neck. I always find this to be one of the more complicated parts of building the guitar. It shouldn't be, but for me, for some reason, it is. And maybe I just make it hard on myself because I kind of cut the neck close to the final dimensions when I do this. Perhaps if I would allow a little bit more width here, it would make this a little easier. But anyway, I do cut it fairly close. And even saying that, admittedly, my necks are generally a little wide on my 6-string guitars. So basically, I just went ahead and cut this everything to the 6-string size. And I believe I can make the 12-string work on this. What you're trying to do is cut a line that when you put the binding on here, then it's going to line up with this, and then you can sand it smooth. So it's a delicate balance. If you make this too narrow, then you're cutting off a lot of your neck. If you make this too wide, then you really got problems. And if you already get your binding glued on there, then you got problems because then it doesn't match up with the neck. It's a delicate act, delicate balance, and I'm just looking at my pencil lines, just looking at them and seeing if I think they're going to be close. I think, if anything, they're a little wide right now, so I think I should at least be able to cut them on these lines, and if I need to, I'll have to sand some off the edges or whatever to get the binding to line up. But for now, I've got my lines on there, and I'm going to go ahead and cut those. At least I know it's not too narrow. You can always cut it again, you know. I didn't show cutting the fretboard on the bandsaw, but it's just a straight line cut, and on both sides. And I got it cut, and it's real close. I think the fretboard might still just be a hair wide for the neck. And I'll probably have to do a little more sanding. I've already run it across the belt sander to straighten the edges that I cut, and it's pretty darn close. It's pretty darn close. But I think I better play it safe and knock down just a little bit more of these edges on this, on both sides. Just trying to, you know, keep it straight and everything. So I'll do that on the belt sander. I've dampened down the edges of this guitar neck, and the reason I did that is because they're a little bit rough sawn, and to be perfectly truthful, it indents in a spot or two. I want to leave as much width on here as I can, so I got this heating iron heated up, and it's over 400 degrees. Let's see if I can tell you what it is. 415 looks like right now, and I'm going to steam these edges, and that'll bring them out a little bit. That'll make them a little bit wider, and that's a good thing for matching up this binding and stuff. Wherever those little indentions are, that'll pull them out a little bit because it's rough sawn. One of our viewers provided this. It's nice. It's handy for different little things. I addressed this in one of the shop talks, so thank you to the viewer that sent this. I can't recall. I'm the world's worst at remembering names, so forgive me for that. But I sure do appreciate it. It's very handy. I'll wet it down a little bit more and see if it'll steam out a little bit more. I think it'll work the way it is. I'm just trying to give myself a little bit of insurance. Sometimes you can really raise this grain up a lot. This doesn't appear to be doing much, unfortunately. It's probably helped it a little bit. I felt an indent right here, and it's not quite as noticeable, so I guess it's helping a little bit. I'm going to see if that is a little bit wider there where I was trying to widen it out. Well, I'll be honest, it doesn't seem to have helped very much. I was hoping to get a little bit more, because, I mean, I can go narrower on the fretboard, but I was trying to keep the fretboard as wide as possible. Right here, there's just a little bit of an indentation in this rough neck. It would be nice if I could pull that out a little bit so that I wouldn't have to narrow the fretboard anymore. And another technique you can use if you're trying to raise the grain is to put a damp cloth on it and iron it just like you're ironing clothes. That sometimes actually does better than doing it directly on the wood. you know, if I'm being truthful, there's a slight underbow on this side, just a very slight underbow from length of this. So I'm trying to raise this whole area just a little tiny bit. And we're just talking a small amount here. We're not talking like, you know, 1/8 inch or anything. We're just talking, you know, 10 thousandths of an inch or something, maybe a little more. Probably 20 thousandths of an inch. Like I said, I think it'll work the way it is. I just trying to keep the neck a little bit wider, as this is a 12 string. Looking down the neck now, that does look a little bit straighter. I'm going to go ahead and do that again. I'm going to go wet this down a little bit more and just do it a couple more times. I think it's worth the effort. Well, I think I've got it is about as close as I can get it and make it work. Kept the width as much as I can keep. Like I said, I probably was my own worst enemy there by not allowing the neck to be just a little bit wider in the rough form. It does seem to match up now. I think I can make it work, and everything seems to be fine. I've got the 2 little pieces of binding there. Those bindings were provided by John Manura again of AccuSlice, and these were originally 80 thousandths thick. I sanded them down to 50 thousandths. I removed 30 thousandths. They're each 50 thousandths, so that's an additional 100 thousandths on each side of the fretboard there. I can allow the frets to come out over that, and that will help me with a little bit of width on my neck as well for the 12 string, and I'll probably do it that way. Normally I have the binding go up over the ends of the frets, but in this case I think I'll have the frets go across the top of the binding. Again, that's just to give me that tiny bit of additional width for a 12 string and yet not make it feel much wider than a 6 string. Triple checking it here, and I think I'm okay with this right where it's at. So the next step is to cut the fretboard to match the body here and everything. The way I'll probably do that is make sure I've got the neck in there the way I want it. I think the neck's still just a tiny bit proud right here. I'm going to have to push it down in there a little bit more yet. And I'm going to double check all the straightnesses and all that stuff. And then I'm going to trace this semicircle on here and allow 50 thousandths on the inside of that, so that when I put the binding on that semicircle, it will come out to match the inside of this hole. At least that's the goal. Looking pretty good. So I'm going to do a little bit of just, you know, double checking off camera here in terms of making sure the neck's straight and everything, and then I'm going to mark this. Well, as best I can, I have measured everything, checked the straightness, the angle, everything, and the neck seems to be just about as close to perfect as a guy could get one. I've got the 14th fret here, I think it is, lined up with the body. I've marked this end up here with a pencil, and very fine pencil. And now what I think I'm going to do is take the width of the binding, lay it there, mark it again, and lay that on that mark. Mark the inside of this now, and I've got to find my little short pencil I had here. And of course on camera you'll never do that, so I'll be back in a minute. Okay. I have this lined up, allowed for the thickness of that binding. Got it in the center of the neck the best I can eyeball it there. I hope it's in the center, so that should make everything right. And now I should be able to get in here and trace this if I can hold it. Of course, everything has to move on you. Well, actually that marked it pretty well. So maybe you can see the mark there. And I'll cut that out now, and I should be able to cut right to that mark because I've moved everything this way 50 thousandths, which is the thickness of the binding. It should work out to come out right to that sound hole. I hope it does anyway. So let's cut that off. Well, I successfully cut the circle, and I also used the little sander there, the spindle sander, to clean that up and make it look real nice. When I line up everything on the neck, It looks like it's going to line up here with the hole just perfectly. I've also shortened these pieces of binding to work with this length. That works pretty nice. I think what I'm going to do now is narrow the binding down to just a little taller than the edges of the fretboard, and then I'm going to go ahead and get this glued up, and so that way we can move on to the next step. Anyway, we'll get this binding trimmed up and we'll get it glued on here. Well, I guess I can rest assured that this fretboard is just a little wider than a standard fretboard, and that it's not going all the way up inside my little press here. This little jig I made to hold the binding and glue the binding on. It's not much wider, I can tell you that. So anyway, we're gonna go ahead and get the glue on here and press it into place and let it do its thing. Use my handy portable glue spreader that I take with me everywhere. It's really about the best glue spreader you can get. You can pay more money for them, I guess, than what this one costs, but it's just about as good as any you can buy. I could probably put some wax paper or something down on this, but I don't think I'm going to have too much trouble with this. I might regret it, but this glue doesn't stick to this type of plastic very well anyway. But we'll see. Might be a mistake. For the most part, you just keep pushing it up inside there, making sure everything's pressed down all the way. And it kind of does its thing. Down here, it's a little bit off the shape. So I'm going to put in a few little spacers here. I've just got some single edge razor blades that I'm using as spacers, and I think they're going to take up the majority of the space. I may have to put in a couple. It's a little bit wedge shaped, so I put in a couple down here. Seems to be taking up the space there. Might try to put one in on this side if it'll go. Looks like it did. That ought to tighten it up enough, and then I can just put some clamps out here on the outer end. Just pressing it all in, making sure it's down as flat as it can go, and I believe it is. So we'll let that set a couple hours now, and that should be finished. It's been several days since I've worked on the 12-string guitar due to other miscellaneous things pulling me away around here on the farm. But I'm back to the fretboard. It's had plenty of time for this binding to set up and dry real good. So I am now going to clean up the binding right to the surface, and I'm going to fret this thing. Go ahead and get the frets in it. As I said, I'm going to have these frets extend over the binding just to give me that additional width, because this is a 12-string. Need all the width I can get without making it any wider is really what I'm saying. As luck would have it, this is a kind of maple that doesn't like to be carved real well. It's kind of chipping, so it doesn't seem to matter which way I go either. And I know this little finger plane's really sharp. I mean, it cuts it pretty easily where it wants to be cut, but where it doesn't want to be cut, it wants to chip. I'll continue on cleaning this up and show you what the next step is. I've got the sides trimmed down to the fretboard. I have not yet put the binding on the back edge here, and the reason for that is I'm going to wait and put that on after I get it on the guitar. I can match that up to the guitar top, and I can also use the hole in the guitar as part of my clamping, pressure to put against here. So anyway, that'll come later. I've got my fret wire here, medium guitar fret wire, and I'm ready to put that in here, but these are straight. There is a radius to the fretboard. It helps to have a little more radius in your fret wire than even in your fretboard, so I'm going to go ahead and put a little radius on this. I've got my little homemade roller here, and we'll give it a shot. My roller doesn't have a hand crank or anything on it. You just feed it through, and you just tighten it a little bit as you feed it through and just curl it up. Now I could run the other one through here at the same time and kind of keep them equal. You know, I guess I'll go ahead and do it that way. It doesn't really matter. You can do one and then do the other. I've done it both ways. One's just about as easy as the other. Give it another little crank down. I know you can't really see what I'm doing, but basically I'm just pulling it through these rollers like that. And a little crank here, you just feeds it down just a little bit, and then I got to run it through again. I can't see what I'm doing, so I'll turn it where I can see it. And I got to run the other piece through. Then you can just lay it on here and see if you got the proper radius. You know, when you got a little more light under the middle there, then you're radiused a little more than the fretboard is, and right now that's about where I'm at, though it wouldn't hurt to have just a hair more. So I'm going to go one more little bit of a crank and push them both through one more time. I think that's going to do for my purposes. Because my frets are going to extend out over this binding, I have to nip off the tang that's built into this, and of course it wants to spin, but there is a tang under here, and that tang needs to be nipped off just on the ends so that it can go over the binding. So that's what these are made for. I use these so infrequently it takes me a few seconds each time to remember how to use it, but you just line this up and nip off the tang, basically, is all it amounts to. I don't know if you can see that or not, if it'll focus on it, but it nips off the little tang there, so it works really well. You know, a lot of people go ahead and pre-cut them all, but I just lay it on here and I cut one at a time. It takes a little bit longer, I realize that, but on the other hand, I have no waste, and you know, it does a nice job. Now I just got to nip off the other tang like so, and now this fret should fit right down in between there, and it does, no problem at all, and the fret ends extend out over the fret, and the trick is getting it started in the slot square and straight. Now I have my plastic mallet, and it's hard plastic and it drives them in really well. If I have any trouble or if I think I need extra, I just take the piece of aluminum, put it on there. It really sets them home when you do it that way. And then the fret ends are a little bit long, they stick out just a little bit, those will be trimmed later. This is just a rinse and repeat performance now. So what I'm going to do is do one more on camera, and then I'll do the rest off camera and show you what it looks like when I get to the next step. Alright, I'll show you what it looks like when I get that finished. Got all the frets installed on here, and I took the end nippers, nipped them all square. Then I just took it over to the belt sander, laid it on the belt sander very lightly, and just did that and just did that. So now the ends are all perfectly square, but they're sharp because they're square like that. So now I'm going to just take this fret leveling tool and just go across at a kind of like a 45-degree angle on the ends, and kind of bevel the ends back a little bit. That's quite a bit better, but still could use some more work, I think. Still rough on the ends. I'll get some fine sandpaper. This is not fine enough. And I'll go across the ends like that and clean that up and make it where it doesn't feel sharp. And I'm not real happy with the very ends. They didn't seem to stick down very well. I don't know if the fret slots were slightly bigger or the tangs were slightly smaller or what, but the ends didn't seem to stay down as well as they could. So I'm probably going to go through and poke down the end like that and put a drop of CA glue on each end all the way down. I'll do that off camera, but I'm probably going to do that because I don't like it when the fret ends pop up at all. I was making the side position dots for the fretboard, and here's a piece of Paduke. I wasn't going to show this, but it is kind of a unique process. This was at least twice this big when I put it in here. I put it in a little drill chuck, and I'm spinning it, and I'm cutting this down. I want to get it down to around, about 80 thousandths, something like that. Presently, we're at 130 thousandths. So I've got around 50 thousandths to go. And here's how I'm doing it. You have to have your sandpaper kind of wrapped around it and hold it still. You can't pull on it because it'll break it. So you basically are putting it between your fingers and spinning it that way. So I thought I'd show you that technique because it might be helpful for a lot of people, for a lot of different things. But there's really no good way to make a really tiny dowel like this. But I've made quite a few this way, and it seems to work pretty well. That keeps it straight that way too, so that it doesn't wobble. So let's see, that was 130 something, so let's see what it is now. 124. So, you know, it's a slow process, don't get me wrong. It takes it a while to do it, but you just have to keep after it. I'll show you what it looks like when I get her finished. Well, my friends, that's what it looks like after you turn it down on the lathe. It's like turning down a piece of pencil lead. I mean, it's that small. It's 79 thousandths of an inch. And 78.5 right there, actually. So I'm a half a thousandths less. And there's 78.5 also. So maybe it's 78.5. It's not really 79. A 2mm drill should actually work for that. So I'm going to get a 2mm drill and we're going to put the side dots in this fretboard. By the way, that was made out of Paduke. You can see the orange color there, which will match the sides of the guitar. So that's the color I used. Here we go. I'm going to drill the side position dots in this fretboard. I'm just using this little block of wood to keep it perpendicular. I've already got them marked. I took a real sharp awl and just punched a little tiny hole right where I want to drill. Hopefully that'll help keep the drill bit in the center.
Oh, can't you hear that lonesome wind blow? So tell me, baby, now why you been going so long? Tell me, baby, now why?
Well, there's hopefully a close-up. If it'll focus on that, you can see the holes there drilled in the side. Now we've got to insert the little Paduke dowel that I made, and hopefully that will match up. We're going to glue the little dots in here, or at least make an effort. I'm using the superphatic glue to glue the pieces in there. It's a thin glue that I think will penetrate down in there very well, and it dries fairly quickly. I'm hoping I'm not making a mistake by putting it in all these holes ahead of time. The reason is I'm concerned about cutting this off is the main reason, but I want to poke them in there, dry this off as quick as possible, and I think I'm just going to cut them off with a end nipper like this. I think that'll work. And I'll go down to the next one. Even though this is wood, Should be able to get the next one in there. I think the end nipper malformed the end there a little bit, so I'm going to have to bevel that back just a hair to get it in there. Actually, the glue dries faster than I thought. It's actually drying fairly quickly. I didn't think it would dry that fast. One more to go, and I'm just cleaning up the end there. When I nip it off with the nippers, it messes up the end a little bit. And if this hasn't dried too much, I'll get this last one in here. I think it worked. Just tapped each one of them just a little bit to make sure they're down in the hole really well. Give that a few minutes to dry, and then I'll sand that smooth. There's a look at what the dots look like from the side there. I think you can see them. And we'll move on. Now that I have the fretboard pretty much knocked out for the 12 string, you know, I still have to put the binding on the end here, but otherwise it's in pretty darn good shape. I'm going to turn my attention to the bridge because I want to attach the fingerboard to the neck, set the neck and everything, but I want to know just exactly where this bridge is going to be and how tall it's going to be and etc. before I do all of that, because I want to try to set the neck as accurately as I can. I've got a piece of rosewood stock here that I'm going to make the bridge out of. I bought a 12 string bridge just as a pattern, basically, just so I'd know the whole pattern. You know, I'm sure I could have done that a different way, but that's the way I chose to do it. Then I was trying to align the custom bridge that I've been making with that. And it didn't line up very well because the custom bridges that I've been making are quite a bit smaller than this 12 string bridge. So I decided to modify my design a little bit, keep the same design, but just make it bigger to fit the 12 string. So that's what I did. So that's the pattern I came up with by just comparing the two and everything and modifying it. And it fits on this piece of stock real well, and you can see I've got it penciled in there. And so now I'm going to go cut that out. I got the bridge blank cut out, and I took it over to the spindle sander and sanded the edges and everything. And it's pretty close. I want to transfer the holes for the 12 string to this bridge blank. I made this a template by just going ahead and drilling the 17/64 hole, just extending it all the way through. That's what the first part of the hole was. Well, anyway, I extended it all the way through with a 17/64 bit, and then I got my 17/64 transfer punch, and it won't go through the hole. And so I tried a couple of different 17/64 bits, and neither one of them, you know, nothing would open the hole up enough for this transfer punch to go through it. So I finally just sanded the end of the transfer punch with some wet or dry fine sandpaper, and it sort of goes through now, but just barely. So anyway, I know it's going to move around on me, so I put some two-way tape on this because I got 12 holes to transfer. And so anyway, hopefully we can get the two-way tape off. I should have taken this off before I turned the camera on, because that'll never come off on camera. Not ever. Try it even with an X-Acto knife. Maybe that'll lift it up. Sure enough, it does. There you go. Okay, got one off. Can we get the other one off? Yes, we can. Now the trick is aligning this up perfectly with this front edge and the front corners, so that I can transfer the holes. And I think I did it. Okay, so now those two are basically stuck together, sort of, kind of. My hope is I can get them apart later. Just double checking the alignment and everything. It looks pretty good. Okay, well, hopefully I can transfer. Yep, that one transferred. I can see it. That one transferred. It's kind of hard to get this back out of there. Yep, that one's okay. My hands are so sore I can't pull it out. I can't pull it out with the pliers even. Gee whiz. I told you they were tight. Yeah, well, no point in you watching me fight this. I'll get all these transferred and then we'll go over to the drill press and drill these out. I'd really like to tell you that went real easy, but pulling that back out of those holes was really difficult. I can't understand why a transfer punch labeled 17/64 doesn't fit a 17/64 hole. But anyway, it didn't. So now I'm going to go over and drill a 3/16 hole. I'm going to have to double check that. But anyway, it'll be a small hole that I'm just going to use for alignment at this point in time. And I'm going to get those holes drilled. I'm not even going to show that. It's just a simple drilling operation at the drill press. So I'll drill those and then we'll see what the next step is. Well, as you can see, the holes are now drilled in that. And I will now go over to the thickness sander and sand these ends down and bring them down to approximately an 1/8 inch thick. I have to remember which side is up on this because, as you can see, the holes are at a slight angle, and that angle is to compensate for the typical angle in a saddle. So if I turn it over, it would be backwards. So I have to make sure I keep this side up. Otherwise, I would have a problem. And in fact, because of that, I'll just go ahead and write up on this. So this side is up. And that would be right. So we'll go over to the thickness sander and take care of these ends. I'll show you what that looks like here in just a moment. Ordinarily, the thickness sander, I would have to adjust it to the thickness of this wood, but the last thing I did was thickness this wood, so it's already set right at the right thickness. So I'll take a little bit off and we'll push this in up to a certain point and we'll repeat on the other side. So here we go.
So long, you've been gone so long now. Tell me, baby, now why you've been gone so long. The wolf is scratching at my floor, Lord, Lord, and I can hear that lonesome wind moan. So tell me, baby, now why you've been gone so long. Somebody said they thought they saw you rolling down in Reno with a big old man from San Antonio.
I've got it at 170 thousandths, 169.5 to be exact. There's 170. I want to go a little thinner than that. I'm not going to go a whole lot thinner. I may go down to a 150. You know, 125 is kind of what I do on a regular guitar, but this is, you know, much more tension with these 12 strings. So I think I'll go down to 150, and I think that'll be just about right. I think 170 is a little bit thick, a little bit clunky. We'll go down a little bit more.
They tell me I'm a fool to pine for you, but what did they know?
My guess is that'll be really close. Well, that's 152. 152. This thing's pretty darn accurate, this machine. So there's 152 thousandths. I'm not going to quibble over the half the thickness of a hair. So I think that's close enough. And now I'm going to work on shaping the rest of this, contouring it. But that might wait a day or so because it's Friday afternoon, and I'm maybe thinking about just taking off a little bit.